The biggest problem people have is they think they're not supposed to have any. And problems are the fuel for growth, right? And it's like, if you don't have any problems, you're either a liar or you might call them challenges. It feels better. I understand that. But anybody who doesn't have problems is either totally asleep at the wheel or they don't have much of any kind of a life. No responsibility, nothing they're building. So I think the first thing is this misnomer that if I have a problem, there's something wrong with me or my life. And I think the second one is this delusion we've sold people on that getting what you want is gonna make you happy. You could call success getting what you want. I don't define it that way, but that's how most people do. But then there's fulfillment. And fulfillment is living what you're made for. It's like, I think the biggest challenge people have, and the reason they're not able to respond to challenges, they're just thinking about themselves, and it's not that hard to meet your own needs. And it's nobody's fault. These little things in our pocket, these little mini computers we used to call phones, they're instantly conditioning you to instantly get what you want. And that's not how human relationship works. And it's sure not how you build a business, right? It's not a straight line. If you go to nature, you will not see a straight line unless a human built it. Because everything grows a little up and down like a stalk, like anything else. But if it really grows, it keeps growing, but it's a winding process. So I think the problem is that people don't have something that they're wanting to serve more than themselves. That's where my energy comes from. I don't have to work in a day of my life. Why the hell do I do all this crazy stuff? I got 105 companies now and I got all these different industries because it's so much more interesting to be in the game of life and keep growing, expanding, and being challenged. That's what makes you feel alive. And are there problems? With 105 companies, I can promise you, if I thought my life was problem-free, I would be really stressed out. And if I was just doing it for me, I would have stopped a long time ago. It's like, I know you've asked me a lot of times about confidence. You just mentioned it again. Is it a lack of confidence? No, it's a lack of mission. What happens is when you have something you want to serve, if it's your child and everything's on the line, you will come up with answers you'll never come up with for yourself, right? So it's like having that sense of mission. And then I think the next problem is that people think they have to know how. I call it the tyranny of how. Like, you get all excited, I'm gonna do this, and then your brain goes, I've never done it before. Oh my God, what did I say? I don't know how to do this. And they tend to focus on how to do it. And when you start with how, you're screwed. Like Martin Luther King had no idea how when he did his I Have a Dream speech. In fact, his wife was the one that pushed him because he was uncertain, right? If you know the real history, it's pretty interesting. But the bottom line is he gets up there and he gives his vision of how it can be done. He talked about what needs to happen and why. If you can figure out what you want and why, and you get strong enough reasons that'll drive you late at night, it'll get you up early in the morning, and the reasons are different. Some people do it for nitty-gritty reasons. Jim Rohn used to say, because some guy told him he borrowed money from this finance company, I forget the name of HFC Finance, whatever the hell it was. And, he hadn't been back since he borrowed the money, And so they're calling him in those days, they could harass you in ways they can't today, right? But embarrass him in front of his neighbors. And Rohn, his first real chunk of money he told me he made because it's like, he set this goal. It was his nitty-gritty reason. His reason to get rich was so he could go down and pay this thing off. And he said he went to the bank and got it all in cash and in small bills. And he bolted into this little HFC, finance place. And the guy who borrowed the money was the fourth best back. And he said, I walked up there, I opened up this brief, and I dumped all the money all over his desk in small bills. And I said, count it, it's all there, I will never be back. He was startled because I hadn't been there since I borrowed the money, right? But he did it for nitty-gritty. Some people do it for their kid. Some people do it, we'll almost all do it for something more than ourselves. Some people do it because they like winning, right? I know that about you, right? It's like, I like winning. I like being the best at what I do. So I'm not gonna settle for less than that. Why would I, right? So you gotta find your reasons. But if you know what you want and you get a big enough why, now you'll figure out how to do it. But if you start with how, the small brain, the fear brain, goes, oh shit, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do 90% of the time either. I know what and why, and then I try something. It doesn't work, I try something else, and I'll do something else. Now I speed it up by learning from the best. So that's why, Money Master the Game is a perfect example. My companies, at the time were $100 million companies. I had one $500 million company. Now we're doing $7 billion. I took what I learned from these guys, I applied it not only to my investing, I applied it to my own businesses. Why do I reinvent the wheel when I just learned from the best on earth? Somebody's that can tell you that little 2 millimeter thing that changes everything. So my life is really about learn from the best, but I don't start with the how. I start with the what and the why. And I think that's the mistake most people make. And then how do you get confident? You do stuff. I'll give you an example. Speaking. It's supposedly outside of falling, like the second biggest fear people have, public speaking. And you've trained yourself, so you don't feel that challenge. But I don't feel that challenge. I've done it a million times, but I didn't feel it early on. And the reason was I tried to explain to people, I'm not getting up thinking about how I'm doing. If I did, I'd probably be a horrible critic of myself. I can be brutal in those ways. I'm focused on how do I serve them? What do they need? What do they want? How can I serve? And when you're focused on others and how to serve them, there's no lack of confidence in you, because if it's not working, you just change your approach, because it's all about serving. People that are scared to speak are thinking constantly, how am I doing? Am I good enough? Am I strong enough? You'll never get confidence. Confidence comes from doing something. Confidence is tying your shoes. Right? Confidence on Michael Jordan making 1,000 shots before you take a break every single day, 6 days a week. So you look at Jordan, or you look at, LeBron, or you look at anybody who's the best in the world at what they do, and you go, aren't they lucky? But if you actually study them, you'll see they're doing things, they're practicing in private things that make them certain in public, and they get rewarded to do in public. And you got to do the same. Build confidence is action. The biggest mistake, people think they're supposed to walk out and be good at it. And if they're not, because they don't want any part of it. I don't want to not look good, not be good, because we live in this social media world where they compare themselves to people that are bullshitting. I got a friend that owns a gym, and we laugh about this all the time. He says, Tony, at least 2 or 3 times. First time he told me this, I couldn't believe it. But I saw it happen one time when I went to go pick him up. We were going to lunch, and he goes, look at this. And these people would come out, a woman or a man, they both do it, and lay out all this stuff, take 1 million pictures of themselves, and then leave. They didn't do any workout whatsoever. That's the bullshit social media, and filters on pictures. And so people compare themselves to not other humans, they compare to people others' bullshit story. And that's why so many people get depressed when I'm sure you've seen the studies show the more time people spend on social media, usually the greater levels of frustration and anger, and certainly depression for a lot of people have. Because you're comparing a world that doesn't matter, plus you're being reinforced by these algorithms in ways that go beyond your conscious awareness. Well, what happens to a muscle if you don't use it? We say you lose it, you don't actually lose it, but it gets weaker and weaker, as you well know, right? And what happens the minute you start making demands on it, especially if you haven't made demands in a while, it doesn't take much to see real muscle growth, right? And so it's like if you constantly live in fear, your world gets smaller and smaller, and it tends to get more fearful. Like, who's more fearful? Someone who's broken 10 bones in their body and healed them as a kid, or someone who never broke a bone? You know the answer is. The kids that are overprotected are fearful all the time. But if you've gone out in the street and, you've gotten in a fight and, you busted your arm or your hand or finger, or you played football or whatever the hell it is, or boxed or something, now it's like, I'm not afraid of that crap, because you've lived it. And there's no substitute. I always tell people, a belief is a poor substitute for an experience. You think you know what China is, but I take you to China, you have a little different experience. And so almost everything I do is give someone an experience. That's the reason, I did the firewalk, I still do, but did for so many years. Before that, I used to do skydiving, but it's hard to get 15,000 people above the sky in New York in the middle of the night. So I had to come up with other tools, but the firewalk was, again, giving you an experience of something that seemed difficult or impossible, and then you get yourself to do it, and your brain goes, wait a second, if I could do that, what else can I get myself to do? That psychological shift is the most important shift that people can make. It's a shift in your identity. We all have a way of identifying ourselves. We have a way of labeling ourselves. So most of us came up with our labels based on how we behaved. But really smart people can do stupid things. Really nice people, mean people can be nice. And so if you judge yourself too soon, and most people's identity, their labels for themselves, who they think they are, has been based on their past, and often many years ago. And so they don't update it. So the metaphor I'd give for identity is like, it's your comfort zone. It's not your goals. So if you took a temperature in the room and it said 68 degrees is my comfort zone, physically, emotionally, financially, I want more in my relationship. I want more physically, energy-wise. I want more financially in my career, but this is what I'm used to. And so what happens? People stay in their comfort zone for the most part. And then let's say something happens and you dip. You're a 68 degreer, that's your mentality, and you drop down to 62, 61, 60, somewhere around 60 or 59, the heaters kick on and go, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're a 68 degreer. What the hell are you doing? We've all experienced that. All of a sudden you go, I'm not going to live like this anymore. I'm not going to be in this relationship. I'm not going to be fat like this. Boom! And you get this drive and you start to change. But what most people don't understand is it happens on the upper end too. Meaning, let's say you got momentum, you start crushing it, you start doing even better than you think. You go from 68 to 70, 88, you're at 98 degrees. Financially, emotionally, spiritually, whatever the metaphor is. And then what happens? You're going to say, hey, your brain goes, who the hell do you think you are? You're not a 98 degreeer, right? Get back to 68. And if nothing else, the heaters stop, you lose your drive, and that'll drift you back. And not enough, the air conditioner can kick on, and you start to kind of sabotage yourself till you get back to your comfort zone. So unless you expand your identity, change is temporary. There's 3 decisions we make every moment of our lives. The first decision we're making is what are we going to focus on? Right now, there's millions of things we could focus on. People listening could be focused on what they're doing, whether it matters or not, a million things, right? But we only focus on a small band of things, and whatever we focus on, we experience in life. And so the first decision, what to focus on, I know what he focused on. He focused on that he had not fed his family because he kept saying it. But then the second decision you make as soon as you focus on something is you give it a meaning. Is this the end of the beginning? If you think it's the end of a relationship, you're going to behave very different than the beginning. Is this person dissing me? Are they challenging me? Are they coaching me? Or are they actually loving me? Whatever meaning you create produces emotion, and those emotions control your third decision, which is, what are you going to do? And I tell you that because he focused on didn't feed his family. The worst part was the meaning. The meaning for him was, I'm worthless, decided to leave our family. That day I had a very different experience. I focused on there was food, what a concept. But then secondly, the meaning is what changed my life. It's why I'm sitting here right now. The meaning I got was, wow, strangers care. My father always said, we grew up in an environment on the other side of the tracks, quite literally. And, I thought it was a wealthy community. It was a lower middle class community, but compared to us, they were wealthy. And my dad would always say, no one cares. And it's like, I had evidence that someone cared so much and they didn't even want credit. They fed my family. And so it's like, if strangers care about me and my family, I'm going to care about strangers. And I made a decision right then at 11 years old, I'm going to feed people when I get older. And so when I was 17, I fed 2 families, and it was so emotionally rewarding. Then I went to 4 and 8, and I got to 1 million. Then I got to 4 million, 2 million from my foundation, 2 million from me. And then in the last 10 years, about 8 years or 10 years ago I started, it took me 8 years. I said, I'm going to provide 1 billion meals here in the United States. And we did that in 8 years, I'm proud to be. 100 million meals that he did through Feeding America as my partner. And all that came, to answer your question, because of the turmoil, as you described it. In other words, I said to someone the other day, I don't know, we're not only fed 1 billion, but now, because of the war in Ukraine, most people are unaware of it. The news doesn't even talk about it. But that's the breadbasket for most of Africa. So there are 11 nations that are on the realm or on the edge of famine. And then, we need, obviously, fertilizer. 50% of the world's food comes from fertilizer. The WWF doesn't want people to use it, but we need it. And because of the war, most of it comes from Russia, so the price has gone through the roof. So normally there's 80 million people a year that are on the verge of starvation. This year it's 350 million. And so I decided, I met with the head of the food program for the UN. It was, a gentleman here that was unbelievable. And what he'd done, he won the Nobel Prize 2 years ago. So he and I joined together and created 100 billion meals. I said, how many do we need to bridge the gap? He said about 70 billion. I said, let's do 100 billion meals in 10 years. I did 1 billion. I wasn't a billionaire when I started. I said, so I've grown, obviously, to make that happen. But all we need is 99 poor people like me, and we can do this, right? And so we went out to do it, and we announced a few days ago, we hit 30 billion meals already in the first 2 years. Most people thought it would be totally impossible. So we're going to make that happen. But here's what I wanted you to get. If I was a well-fed child, do you think I'd be working this hard? I know, I'm proud to be a good human being. I believe I'm a good human being, but I don't think I would have that same drive. So I think hunger often comes, not always, often comes from having gone through enough pain. Like, I've suffered enough. I don't want somebody else to suffer.